Hi, everybody. This is Teddy Atlas. Welcome to the Ringside Boxing Show. Glad you're joining us. Make sure you're ducking and bobbing and weaving. You never know.
Live from Monterey on California's beautiful Central Coast, this is the Ringside Boxing Show. I'm Dennis Taylor, welcoming you to join me and my expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwaan Zahid, and John J. Raspanti, today and every week for the hottest, sweatiest show on the West Coast. And now, from Studio 1A, it's the Ringside Boxing Show.
Hey, welcome to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm Dennis Taylor, and today we're going to take you back in history 130 years during the second part of today's show, when we'll be joined by author and historian Ron Jackson, who has a brand new boxing book waiting for you. It's called Fight to the Finish, The Barge Battle of 1889, Gentleman Jim Corbett, Joe Kowinski, and the fight that launched boxing's modern era. This is a really colorful tale of the rivalry between Corbett and Kowinski, which culminated with a historic and brutal fight that took place on a barge out in the water somewhere. So the authorities could not interfere. It was illegal back then. My partner John J. Raspanti's got that one for us, and it'll be coming up very shortly. Our British correspondent, Paul McLaughlin, took the week off. He'll be back next week, and we'll lead it off as we do each week with a look at our current events with our expert analyst, Travis Hartman, a professional boxer, trainer, and promoter from Osborne, Missouri, now living and training in Orlando, Florida. Rizwaan Zahid is a boxing journalist from Toronto. John J. Raspanti is chief lead writer for MaxBoxing.com and DogHouseBoxing.com. And John's got a brand new book climbing the charts on Amazon right now. It's called Blood on My Notebook, Dispatches from the World of Professional Boxing. And Travis isn't with us today. He's the tennis channel apparently yanked him aside because his girlfriend, his longtime girlfriend, Irina Falconi, made it to the semifinals of a big tournament in Houston. So I think they wanted to talk to them as a couple today. So Travis may pop in on us real late, but I kind of doubt it. So, guys, big heavyweight rematch coming up Saturday at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Deontay Wilder is going to put his WBC title belt on the line again against Luis Ortiz. Wilder's 41-0 with 40 knockouts, one of which was a 10th round TKO over Ortiz back in March of 2018. Wilder also has one draw, which of course came against Tyson Fury. Ortiz's loss, the only blemish on his record was against Wilder. Ortiz is 31-1, 26 knockouts. And Riz, the vulnerability people see in Ortiz is that he's listed as 40 years old, and people think he might be a lot older than that. The last time they fought, Wilder was only ahead by a point on 3 scorecards at the time of the TKO, but Ortiz also nearly knocked out Wilder in the 7th round that night. Wilder was in survival mode when the bell rescued him in that round. What do you expect from this rematch?
I can't expect much differently, to be honest. One guy's a lot older, one guy's still relatively in his prime and has less wear and tear. I don't know. I can't see. I think it goes almost the exact same way. Wilder's never been a guy to win rounds. I think there's one consistency we've seen with him is that he loses a lot of rounds. It's been more than a few times that his fights are close before he ends it with a big knockout. He was probably behind on the Ortiz scorecards. It was close. Most people thought he lost against Fury, but all of those he hurts, knockdowns, or knocks out his opponent. The only time he went the distance is, against Premier Severn, and he avenged that. It wasn't an avenge because he already won the first one, but, a first-round knockout is the way to perfect that first win. I don't think he knocks out Ortiz in the first round, but I do think he knocks him out, and I think he'll do it pretty quickly. No one seems to know what Ortiz's actual age is. Some people have said, some people have said like 45, right? Which to be honest, could be true. And also, what's also going to be very noticeable is when our he's come in, he's 40. So what kind of shape he's going to come in? Because in that first fight, I think we said that he was arguably tired, I think, when he got knocked out. That I think he emptied, he couldn't get Wilder out in the 7th when he had a chance, and he just was low, and he just couldn't hit him. But that, to me, looking at the way he looked way heavy to go 12 rounds. and he hasn't had to go 12 rounds. For the most part, arguably, I think he can outbox Wilder fairly comfortably. There's a picture from a couple of days ago where he does look very good shape, but once we have the weigh-in, we'll have a better idea. I think that's kind of the only thing he can do differently. I mean, I don't think any guy at this point is really going to change their strategy, right? Ortiz's job is to outbox Wilder, right? Because he has the boxing background, he has the skill, he has, despite him being 40 and he doesn't really move a whole lot, but he has, boxing knowledge enough to box intelligently. Wilder's still just a knockout puncher. He just happens to be a phenomenal knockout puncher, and that's, we've said this, like a cheat code, right? Just it bails him out every time. But I mean, you don't really need anything else in boxing if you're able to always score a knockout shot. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ortiz is winning for the first few rounds, and then Wilder catches him. And if you remember, Wilder knocked him down the 5th round in the first fight, but Wilder didn't finish. I don't think Wilder's going to make that same mistake. For the most part, Wilder, when he gets a guy in trouble, is able to finish. And usually that guy doesn't survive any other rounds. I mean, when Fury got knocked down in round 9, he wasn't that hurt. In round 12, he was obviously very hurt. But usually when Wilder knocks a guy down, like, that's it. And sometimes those guys get back up, but, the idea is after that, and because Wilder's so unorthodox, guys train when they're hurt, right? They understand how to deal with, being uncomfortable when they're hurt. Whether it's in the gym and all that, but all that they deal with and all that they practice with is with, conventional fighters. Wilder's throwing everything incorrectly, but because of the speed, athleticism, and reach, it works. And you're not trained for that. You don't practice for that because you simply can't. So I think this time Wilder hurts him and Wilder finishes him. I'm going to say in round 5 or round 6. I just can't see Ortiz at his age. I don't even know what his real age, but if his fake young age is 40, that means he's got to be older than that. I just can't see him being able to box on his toes and keep Wilder at bay for 12 rounds. I mean, Fury was able to do that for a few reasons. Fury's a lot larger. Fury is, both of them are southpaws, but Fury is, arguably like probably 6-7 inches taller or something like that. He's got another 10, 20 pounds on Ortiz too. And Fury's, Fury's been through hell in life, actually. So he was able to kind of get around that. I just can't see Ortiz doing the same thing again. I think his best chance was in the last fight, and if he wasn't able to pull off the upset then, I can't see him doing better this time around. We've seen, the same thing happened, I think, with Ward and Kovalev, right? We said Kovalev had his chance. We know the younger, fresher fighter is going to be better the next time. I think that's what we're seeing here. Wilder's going to be better the next time. I can't see Ortiz doing anything better than he did the last time.
John, Riz just alluded to that photo a couple days ago of Ortiz, and he looks ripped. And the article says that he's looking to come in at 230 pounds, which would be 11.5 pounds lighter than he came in before. Wilder weighed 214.5, I think, for that fight. Betting odds are Ortiz kind of gassed. He won the first 4 rounds of that last fight, and then he got knocked down in the 5th, and seemed like he got tired later on in that first fight. And of course, he is older, but Wilder's a 6.5 to 1 betting favorite this morning. Do you buy that? Do those odds feel right to you?
Nope, I don't buy that. I think that Ortiz, he is fighting for more than a lot of fighters. He has a very ill daughter that's not ill at the moment, but he's very motivated by that, and so is Wilder. I think he knows that this is his last shot to win the world title. But everything that Riz said is true. He's older. Mm-hmm. Not only does he know Wilder better after fighting him, but Wilder knows him after their first fight. I do believe that the thinking is what you stated, Dennis, is that he got tired, so he brought in a new nutritionist, and the guy has got him about as ripped as he can be, and we'll see if his stamina matches that, because the thinking seems to be that obviously that from them, and I'm thinking about that documentary I watched, and this is obviously true, that Wilder needs room to throw those big bombs that he throws, the bomb squad, that especially that right hand, and Wilder's going to try to, Ortiz is going to try to stay on the inside of those and outbox him and try to avoid the right hand and not get clipped like he did in the first fight. He's a live underdog as far as I'm concerned. I think it's more 3-1. A number of people I respect think Ortiz could win this. I agree. I think he could win, but I don't think he's going to win. Agreeing with a lot of what Riz said. I think Wilder is he might be 34, but that's a prime age for heavyweight. He's got a big fight coming up. He certainly doesn't underestimate Ortiz. He knows what he's facing, but I think it's not going to be easy. I agree again that he's probably going to be behind, like he tends to be. Hell, he was losing to Gerald Washington when he knocked him out in the fifth round. I think he had lost 3 out of the first 4 rounds against Gerald Washington. So you can bet that as long as Ortiz is Ortiz, he's going to do that. But there's another factor, too, that the last time I watched Ortiz fight, he got hit with way too many right hands. And as we know, you do not want to get hit by a Wilder right hand. He knows that, too. Now, maybe that was because he is in as good shape, or perhaps it's like we were talking about the age factor. He's older, like we've seen with Golovkin getting hit more now. You get hit more as you get older. And after about 3 rounds, he was getting hit more than he should have against probably a top, probably ranked 18th or 19th heavyweight. So there's always these intangibles with boxing that I love. You never can underestimate, in my view, or not never, but you can when a guy's 20-0 and a guy's 0-18. You pretty much know what's going to happen. That happens in England sometimes with those fights, but most of the time you think you've got it figured out, but you don't, and sometimes you don't. And I think we've pretty much got a good idea, and common sense tells me that Wilder should win. But as we know, what it says in common sense or on paper doesn't always happen. So I'm intrigued. I love this. I think, like I said, I think Ortiz knows this is his last shot. I think he's older than 42. I wrote an article, Dennis, and I joked around and said I think his mom is the only one who knows how old he really is. Nobody else knows. It's like a state secret. So I think he's probably closer to 45. I think he's 44, 45. But he does have the skills to outbox Wilder at times. It's just, can he avoid the right hand for 12 rounds? See, I don't think so. I think Wilder will knock him out again. I don't think it's going to be 5. I think it'll be after 5, but I think we'll see the same thing. Winning a second fight after you lose the first, we just mentioned Kovalev. He did it against Alvarez, but I think he got a lot of help from Alvarez because Alvarez, leader Alvarez in the rematch, because he was knockout happy. So that played right into the hands of Kovalev boxing. But historically, winning a second fight after getting knocked out, that's tough. And it could happen, but I don't think so. I think Wilder will win again.
Here's the other thing I was thinking about, guys. Deontay's fought less than 1 round in the past year. He knocked out Dominic Breazeale in the first round in May. And his previous fight was a split draw with Fury last December. I don't hear anybody talking about the possibility of ring rust for Wilder. Should they be? Is that if you fought one time, if you've only been in the ring for a few seconds within the past year, isn't ring rust a possibility?
It's hard to say. I mean, I can't see. I think ring rust depends on who it is. I think the guys who are slick boxers are the ones who suffer ring rust and more. I think guys like Wilder, to be honest, Wilder loses rounds left, right, and center, like I said. So whether he has rust or crazy active, that really has never affected how he is in the ring. We saw Billy Joe Saunders last week. He looked like he had ring rust. We've seen Golovkin after a long layoff. He looks like he has some ring rust, and he's getting older. I think ring rust definitely affects guys who get older, as funny as that is, right? I think there's an ideal amount of fights guys should have per year. I think when they're older, usually it's about 2 fights per year. Anything less than that, I think really suffers ring rust. I think younger guys, activity is the best thing for them. Guys who fight like 3 times a year, that's ideal, but when they're fighting less than that, it's a problem. And I think it shows, right? I think for certain fighters it shows a lot more than others. Some fighters it doesn't really show that much, but for some fighters it's really apparent. So I don't think it's I don't think it's always necessarily clear, but I can see it for. I mean, what's the ring rust for Wilder? He probably loses some more rounds. Like it's not really. Again, it doesn't. I don't think in this fight specifically it would affect too much because Wilder's not going to outbox Ortiz. Like I don't think that's his game plan. I think his plan is to be very selective in shots, and that's another thing. You have to remember, Wilder doesn't throw a lot of punches, right? Wilder might throw 30 punches around, 35 punches around. All of them, they'll just have just incredibly bad intentions that go with it, and that makes him, every single one of those punches dangerous. But I think the big thing for me is this. I mean, Wilder's not a guy who has a lot of head movement or anything, but he has to. Ortiz has to hurt him early. Ortiz has to hurt him. Like, even though it appeared Wilder was definitely buzzed in that 7th round, I wouldn't say he was like out on his feet or anything like that. And Ortiz has decent power, so if Ortiz isn't able to hurt Wilder, he's not going to win. If Wilder's just going to walk forward and throw the punches he wants, you're not going to be able to beat him. Even Tyson Fury, who was definitely just trying to outslick Wilder, he still was able to command his respect with power, right? Wilder was not able just to throw reckless abandon and eventually something will land. So Ortiz has to land something early, and I don't think Wilder's ring rust, or if he has any, is really going to make a difference with any of that because, again, he's not a guy who relies on head movements or angles or any of those sort of things, right? It's very predictable what he does. It's predictable that he's going to be unpredictable. It's predictable that he's going to throw reckless, crazy, weird shots and looping shots. But, he's a double-handed, powerful fighter, and he's going to throw a long jab and a long right hand. And that's coming. And it's not, I don't think ring rust is really going to affect that too much. Another thing is, Wilder's not a guy who really gets out of shape in between fights. For all the talk about Wilder not being the most consummate pro in terms of his style, outside the ring, he behaves like a fighter, right? He behaves like a boxer should. Mm-hmm. He keeps himself in shape. He's disciplined, all those sort of things. And it's funny because I think the ring rust definitely affects the guys who don't always follow that. Billy Joe Saunders, has won up weight divisions and all that, and we've seen him put on a little more weight in between fights. I've never seen Wilder really put on weight in between fights. Wilder's never been out of shape. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're not out of shape and you're still, in the gym and all that, then you're still, it's just, I think the farther away you get from the ring, and that means, nutrition and everything else, then I think you're going to bring on some ring rust. If you're not doing any of that, mm-hmm. I don't think ring rust is going to happen. So I don't expect any ring rust from Wilder whatsoever.
Along that same line, being a fighter away from the ring, is anybody but me questioning whether Tyson Fury is still focused on becoming a heavyweight king? John, he did his WWE wrestling thing, and he kind of suggested that it won't necessarily be the last time that he does that. Now he's talking about getting together with Conor McGregor and letting McGregor train him for an MMA fight. The easiest thing to do when you reach the top is take your foot off the gas and start enjoying yourself. We've seen it happen to a zillion fighters. Fury hasn't. Well, he reached the top when he beat Klitschko, and then he got the draw against Wilder. So I guess he's up there. But he's already playing around. It seems like he's a flake and he's an entertainer. We all see that. But this sure seems like the wrong time to be screwing around with a Wilder rematch coming up in February.
Yeah, and I'll address that in a second. I want to say something about Wilder that I don't think we ever say for some reason, and I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. I don't. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I've mentioned it before, but he's not the pretty fighter. He's not Lomachenko, but he just knocks everybody out, and how many fighters wish they could do that like he does? And it seems like he doesn't get the credit that he should get for his ability. This is his 10th title defense. Nth.
Yeah.
And
that's incredible.
That is very impressive. And he's fighting a guy that a number of heavyweights didn't want anything to do with a few years ago, and a number of them still don't want anything to do with. So I think he deserves a lot of respect for that. This is a big risk for Wilder. Now, like we stated, he should win, but you never know. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think he doesn't, for some reason, maybe some of the things he said in the past, but Dennis, we've had him on the show. He's a fun guy. Mm-hmm. He's a fun guy. I didn't buy any of that. He was just trying to build up the fights. Did he say some things that were out of line? Sure, but boxers do that. I think he's a really good guy outside the ring, and people seem to be stuck in this whole way of thinking that he's not. I don't think that's right at all. People need to take another look at this guy. He wants to fight. Hell, he was going to fight Povetkin, and then Povetkin failed the drug test. He'll fight the guys. He won't avoid them like some heavyweights do. So I think he deserves all the credit in the world for what he's doing. Now, Fury, see, I just think Fury has got the attention span of a gnat, Dennis. I think he just gets bored, and I don't think he's resting on his laurels or anything like that. I just think he gets bored, and he needs other things. He needs stimuli. Constantly needs stimuli of some kind. So he's doing the WWE thing, and he's perfect for that. He's talking about MMA. When the fight with Wilder has to be official after Wilder wins. So he's waiting for that. He'll get serious again, but I think that's the thing. A guy like him, you said it when you said he's a flake. He is. He's a very entertaining, enjoyable, likable flake who I think just, like I said, hell, I've been accused of having an attention span of a gnat myself, so I know how that is. You need that stimulation. You get bored so easy. You're jumping all over the place, and I think he does that because he can. He's Tyson Fury. He's not us. We might want to jump over here and do something, but we can't. He can. Yeah, I want to do the wrestling thing. That looks like fun. He's probably been watching it all his life, and now they want him to do it too. So it's like, okay, I'll do that. Well, yeah, MMA, I'll do that. He's obviously not scared of anything. He's a gambler in all ways possible. So I think that's just Tyson Fury being Tyson Fury. I don't think it's any deeper than that.
Did your ex-wife, was she the one who said you had the attention span of a gnat? Just curious.
No, that is my present woman in my life, the love of my life. I said that I had the attention span of I think something a little larger than a gnat, like a fly, and she corrected me immediately and said, no, it's more like a gnat. And I did say I thought that was a little offensive, but I did say, as I changed the subject really quickly, that it was probably true. So there you go. They keep
women have no idea what's going on in our heads. They don't know.
They don't know. That's the truth.
Riz, you'll find out. You're getting married here one of these days soon. Hey, Riz, pretty remarkable number of people are picking Andy Ruiz to beat Anthony Joshua again on December 7th in Saudi Arabia. John was mentioning a few minutes ago that one of them is Doug Fisher. Joshua is roughly a 2.5 to 1 betting favorite. If you were a betting man, where would you be putting your money on this one?
Based on the odds, I'd probably go with Ruiz also. If you're just saying he didn't land lucky, he didn't score. It wasn't a one-punch knockout that could kind of happen to anyone, and that's kind of running it back again. It's not one of those. So I can definitely see why why people think that Ruiz can do it again. And if you guys remember, so much kind of got lost in that fight with everything that happened. But just a few things to know. In the first two rounds, Joshua barely less. Ruiz still was having a better impact on the first two rounds, I felt, and I think most people probably do the same. I don't think it was inconceivable to think that Ruiz was winning the fight even before the kind of knockdown fest began. as far as boxing skill, I think we actually mentioned this before the fight. Ruiz has good boxing skill. We're not surprised that he was able to outbox Josh. I think, just like kind of most of his opponents. So I think, I was surprised that Ruiz was winning the first couple of rounds. When he got knocked down, up, and if you look at the knockdown he scored in that round, it was he actually tried it before he got knocked down by Joshua, as Joshua landed his left hook. Ruiz was bobbing, weaving, and landing a very crisp left hook when Joshua opened up a little bit. And then the same thing happened later in the round, and the same thing happened, in the seventh when Ruiz finished him. Every time Joshua thought he had Ruiz hurt, he opened up. And when he opened up, Ruiz just with, for a guy who's that freaking huge, he has amazing head. And he would just bob and weave, and he would just really tighten up his shots. But those are skills, right? Those are not skills that you would master overnight, right? Those are skills that are built in the gym for years and years and years and years. And again, Ruiz is not, he's been boxing longer than Joshua has. He's been boxing longer than probably Wilder has too. He's been a long time boxer for, in his amateur days, and he's been around, for a really long time. Obviously he's not the 25-1 underdog anymore, but 2.5-1 to underdog. You're going to think that Joshua is going to come back and put it all together. I mean, Joshua has heart, right? There's, he could have folded at any point during that fight. He didn't. He got up against Klitschko when it looked like he was done too. But that being said, mentally, you really don't know what you're going to get until he's back in the ring. You just don't. We've seen so many undefeated fighters. We can think of Broner. That's a great example, right? Broner undefeated. People thought he was going to be great. He's never recovered from that Maidana loss, has he? Right? That just, and you see it. You see it in the ring with him. You see that he's tentative. You see that he's not willing to throw the way he used to. This is going back a while, but Broner was considered a to-be, future pound number one guy. There was murmurs of him fighting Mayweather because he was Mayweather's protege, and there was the thinking that he could, emulate what Mayweather did in his career, which is crazy to think about now. But the idea is that loss changed him, and that's it. And he used to knock guys out. Now he doesn't even throw knockout shots anymore. I don't think that's going to happen with Joshua, but you do wonder how much, is he going to be even slightly tentative, right? If that left hook is open again, is he going to take that chance and risk, getting countered in return, or he's going to elect to back off that moment? And the other thing is, who's better? I think it's a question I don't think we all have the answer to, but who's better suited to go 12 rounds? Is it Joshua or Ruiz? Joshua carries a lot of muscle around, and he's only been 12 rounds once, and that was against Joseph Parker, who he beat. Andy Ruiz, ironically, was only won 12 rounds once as well, and that was also against Joseph Parker, where he lost a close decision. A lot of people thought he won because it was in Parker's hometown also. But I would say that just the way, because Ruiz is calm when he fights, right? And he knows how to win rounds without expending too much energy. I think when you're 265 pounds and 40% body fat and you're heavyweight champ, you probably find a way to save some energy, right? But he's done a great job of it. I make a joke, but let's face it, he's doing a great job of this, right? How can I criticize him? So, I think I don't think it's the same, but I think in some ways, Ortiz and Ruiz are both the guys who are going to come in looking to outbox their opponent, and Joshua and Wilder are still looking for the knockout to win. And I think we said this before, that Joshua and Wilder are not by far the most skilled heavyweights in that division, like not even close. But that doesn't mean they won't be the number one, number two guy just because the power that they carry. The thing we've seen, though, we've seen Joshua get hurt. We've seen Joshua down numerous times now in his career. And again, it's the type of shots that land. You could say that he got concussed because it was an equilibrium shot, which is, very well true, especially in the last couple of knockdowns. But to me, Ruiz knows how to box, and I think he has the ability to force Joshua into making mistakes. And especially just like Ortiz, he says he's coming in better shape. And it's funny because both fights, both the Ortiz-Wilder fight and the Ruiz-Joshua fight kind of went in a similar script, right? Ruiz got knocked down. He came back and scored the knockout. Ortiz got knocked down and almost scored the knockout. He just wasn't able to finish. He wasn't able to close. And funny enough, that was also in round 7. So there is definitely some similarities in between both fights because you have two guys who are really raw, who are just super powerful, and that helps them win. I just think Ruiz, because of his age, he's 11 years younger than Ortiz, so I think he has a much better chance, and I think that's why the odds kind of show it. And he did it the first time. And I think I don't know the shape he's going to be in. I mean, I hope, to be honest, I hope he doesn't come like 30 pounds lighter, because that would be, I don't know, that just would be strange, right? I just don't know how he's able to pull that off. But just to note, though, against Joseph Parker, he came in at 256. Against Joshua in the first fight, he came in at 268. Like, that's a 14-pound difference. Against Parker, though, he went 12 rounds. I expect him to come somewhere around that weight, and I think he'll go 12 rounds. Because his weight has fluctuated. He's been as high as like 270 something. He hasn't really been actually almost 300 actually at the beginning of his career. He hasn't really went underneath like 245 or so, 250. So I think he'll come in around that. And in some ways, I just think that's he has deceptive speed. He has deceptive power. The other thing is, I don't know, and this is a huge question mark because no one's really had this. Who are the fans going to be? It's in Saudi Arabia, and I guess by proximity, UK is a lot closer. So I think you might get a lot more UK fans. Theoretically, that should help Joshua, but I mean, I don't know who benefits or if this is a disadvantage for either fighter. Like, is this actually neutral ground? Because in New York, funny enough, most of those fans were Joshua fans when that happened, right? They all did the UK trip to New York for theoretically a fun weekend. I don't know what's gonna who's the hometown crowd in Saudi Arabia. And it's funny because we haven't really heard too much about this rematch in terms of media availability and all those sort of things. So how does that affect each fighter? I just think that, but I'll say this. I haven't heard one lick of news from Joshua's camp at all over the last 3 months. I think Joshua is in some sort of lockdown, dead focus. But until this is the kind of fight where until the fight actually starts, until we see a round or two, if it goes that far, we have really no idea what we're going to see. I just think that Joshua definitely has the heart and all that, but if he's tentative at all, he's in deep trouble. Because if you let Ruiz win rounds, he's going to find a way to win. And Joshua is not. Joshua has had a few late knockouts, but he's not a guy whose power has carried usually well that late. He knocked out Chakam in the round 10. He knocked out Klitschko in round 11. But those are, neither of those guys are young. Klitschko was the last fight of his career. Against Joseph Parker, he noticeably slowed down. Joshua has to establish, just like Wilder, they need confidence early. If their confidence is shattered early, there's the potential of the upset on both sides. But I definitely think Ruiz has a much bigger chance to shock the world than Ortiz does. But that being said, this is why we say that there should be no such thing as marination. Because arguably, we could see Ruiz versus Ortiz for unification rather than Wilder and Joshua. And no one thought that 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, and I got to stay with you for one quick thing, too, because you were mentioning the crowd in Saudi Arabia. Mexican fans and Mexican-American fans like their beer, and so do British fans. So why would any of them go to Saudi Arabia? I don't think that's a place where you can go get a cocktail, is there?
From what I understand, I mean, if you're an expat, if you're from out of town, there's specific cards and areas you can go to for all those sort of things.
Okay.
Because there are tons from the UK who do live in South Africa. There's law firms there and all those sort of things. With the amount of legal money you're getting in, you got to have some law offices, right? But yeah. I don't know. I just think in terms of proximity and geography, that there might be more UK fans there, right? It's not that far.
Yeah.
That being said,
it might all be Saudis.
Who knows, right? I mean, to be honest, I don't know what the price of the tickets are. If it's priced to just suit them, then it's going to be fully neutral ground, right? There's not going to be. Yeah. You're not going to find one Mexican American there. You're not going to find one British fan there either, because that is if it's. There's a reason they're doing it there, right? Because
expensive ticket. Yeah.
It's going to be a very expensive ticket. In fact, I'm actually just trying to Google and see if I can find ticket prices, but it might be so exclusive, my internet might not be able to access that website. So that'll give us a good idea. Actually, you know what? Here, I might be able to actually find it here. I just don't see it. I think it's going to be according to this, the cheapest tickets are, there's only 5 tickets left, and the cheapest tickets are about $300 American, which is not really a lot. And then other tickets, which are front row, are probably running about $2,000. But there's only 5 tickets left. So who knows what the black market is actually going to sell it on. But those are still, I mean, when you factor in flights and all that sort of thing, I mean, if you're a fan in the UK, are you planning to go to Saudi Arabia to spend, a couple $1,000 plus the tickets for a fight? So this might be literally the most neutral we've ever seen in boxing for such a high magnitude fight. It's weird, right? Usually, I mean, it was in New York, but Joshua's fans traveled. So when it's UK in America, when it's a UK fighter fighting in America, fans travel, right? If it's there's a fight in New York, but it's a Jean Pascal or something, Montreal fans are going to travel. This is different. This is really, really strange. We've never seen anything like this. So I'm curious. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that helps guys. Maybe that helps guys like Joshua, who has to do 0 media availability, who has to do 0 appearances and that sort of thing. But maybe for Ruiz it's better because I think he got a good amount of fame after the first fight, and with this fight, maybe he can go back to being a little anonymous and just focusing on it. I don't know. This is going to be. I don't think it's going to really make a difference in the outcome, but it's definitely going to be interesting just to see how the crowd reacts to certain things, because I don't think they favor one guy or another. This might be the most neutral, big-time boxing fight we've ever seen.
Man, you guys come up with interesting stuff. Hey, John, Teddy Atlas is speculating that that Joshua probably just stopped lifting weights because he's significantly thinner, apparently, in appearance for this rematch with Ruiz than he was before. And maybe his Atlas has maybe his handlers thought he had become too muscle bound and less fluid. And he also suggests the possibility that maybe Joshua needed some kind of major change in his training ritual just to restore his confidence that things would be different in the rematch. We're going to thin you out. You're going to be more fluid. You're going to be a better fighter. What do you? I mean, it can't be roids because I don't think he was using PEDs because before the Big Baby fight, they were both getting tested, and Big Baby tested positive for everything, and Joshua didn't test positive for anything. So I think we can kind of put that to bed. But why do you think Joshua is so much thinner for this? Did he need to be? Did he feel like he needed to be for this?
Well, yeah, and I need to correct one thing, Dennis. I don't want Dougie to get mad at us. He said that he thinks Luis Ortiz could definitely win.
Oh, okay.
Saturday.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's all right. Dougie, get mad at us. Sometimes you can tweak too much. The way and it can hurt you. Everything Teddy is saying, Teddy is, in my opinion, one of the best. So what he says, I always listen to very closely. It makes sense what he's saying. I think the Joshua team thinks that they want him to box more because I think they're a little bit afraid if Ruiz hits him again, he'll go. And Ruiz is going to be aiming for those temples. You know that. He's going to try to do the same thing. And I also think a thing that people don't talk about very much, and this is only, and it's not that I've been holding this in for months, it's just that I was watching the fight again because I got to write about it. And when Ruiz got knocked down, he looked over at Joshua, which was really a Hollywood moment, like, man, that was a pretty good shot, brother. I was impressed. And he got up, and Chris Mannix says, watch Joshua, he's a great finisher. And Joshua landed a right hand that probably would have knocked the Empire State Building down. But Ruiz took it. He took that right hand. His body kind of swayed down a little bit like he was going to go down, but he didn't. And then seconds later was when he landed that big-time temple shot that messed up messed up Joshua big time. So his chin is a major factor coming into this fight too. But it's funny, isn't it interesting how they're both supposedly have lost weight, and maybe there'll be some dogs at that fight, Dennis. I hear dogs barking in the background, so it's going to be sold out.
Yeah, that's Dodo, the official barking dog.
The barking
dog of the Ringside Boxing Show. Yeah.
That's right. Everybody's there. That's right. That's the Ringside Boxing Show dog. That's right. So again, sometimes you can tweak too much, but it's strategy that's key to me. I do agree though that Joshua might have been looking a little bit too muscle. Yeah, he did look too muscle bound. Didn't hurt him before, but it hurt him this time because he was fighting a guy who's really a good counter puncher, and that's the thing about Andy Ruiz. He really knows how to counter, and that's what he did, and that's what he was doing to Joshua. He'd wait and wait and wait, and then bam, he was accurate. And I think they're probably thinking, look, if we're a little thinner or a little lighter, not as muscle bound, we'll be a little faster. We'll be able to anticipate those counter shots, and he's going to know that going in anyway. So again, the strategy of boxing, the thought sometimes that it's just a couple of guys going in there throwing haymakers. Well, there's that a little bit, but there's also a strategy, and they're both going to have game plans, and they're both. I think Joshua's going to try to box more, but what Riz said that I zeroed in on and agree with is we really don't know. With all these intangibles going in, with where the fight is going down, with both guys talking about losing weight, with so much writing on it, it really is. I consider it basically a toss-up fight too in a lot of ways. We're just going to have to see what happens. If Ruiz gets to Joshua early and mucks with his confidence, I think that'll pretty much do it. I think Joshua will lose again, but I do think he also has the talent to win. So again, next week or 2 weeks from now when we talk about it in more detail, if we do, and get Travis's opinion, because I'd love to hear his view on this. I'm really looking forward to this one. Yeah, December 7th. I can't wait for that one to go down.
Eddie Hearn now says that he's considering future boxing shows with YouTubers. I think all of us rolled our eyes when we heard this because we love boxing and we respect the men and women who do it as a career. And for a respected top-level boxing promoter to use world-class fighters like Billy Joe Saunders and Devin Haney as warm-up acts for a fight between a couple of mouthy YouTube stars disrespects the investment that pro fighters make, I think, and the risks they take and what they put on the line every time they go in the ring. And there's no way around this part. Eddie Hearn is only doing it to line his own pockets. There's no other explanation. Riz, am I overreacting to this, or does this piss you off too?
It pisses me off because I'm not really surprised, right? I don't think my expectations of promoters are pretty low. I think every promoter, to be honest, would want to do this. I don't think this is anything unique. And to be honest, if you are Eddie Hearn, and I'm going to play a rare role and play the optimist here. With how much money that fight brings in, and that means that you end up seeing other fighters on a card more often, and you have more slots, and you theoretically attract more boxing fans or more people to the zone, which means you get more fighters signing up to the zone, which means theoretically you get those better matchups. Then I'm all for it. I think there's no reason to think that Bob Arum or De La Hoya or whatever, any single one of these promoters wouldn't have thought something similar. I just think maybe ESPN said, no, we're not going to show this kind of fight. You got to think of audience, right? The zone is built for more people, of my-ish generation, who are more tech savvy and who's good, who are the followers of these YouTube quote unquote stars, right? It's the same generation. So it's catering towards the same audience, where ESPN doesn't really have that. ESPN is catering towards more, I wouldn't say traditional audience, but ones who've been watching boxing on ESPN for a long time. So I think that does kind of factor in. And to be honest, like I said, it doesn't, as long as it doesn't take away from other boxing cards and events and slots, where I think that was the thing with HBO before, right? They had X amount of slots for the year, whether it's 10 or 20. And if its fight's already taken up and they don't have any more of a budget, then it has to be on pay-per-view. If it's not on pay-per-view, it gets delayed to the following year. DAZN doesn't really have that problem. And if, it brings in more money and it's going to cater towards other things, that's fine. So for me, I think the best way to think of it is not so much even like a boxing card or a boxing event, but almost like DAZN just has another sport essentially. Like I think you were saying, pretty much like celebrity boxing of some sort, right? And I'm not going to watch it just because I don't frankly care. I'm not going to watch two guys who can't box and box in front of 60,000 people or whatever it is. So it just doesn't make sense for me to do so. But if other people are watching it, well, then by all means, right? And I think let's face it, is anyone going to say it's a bad business decision? You might think it's annoying and you might not like it, but I don't think anyone's going to say it's a bad business decision. And if it's not a bad business decision, you're not going to really blame any sort of promoter. I mean, there's a lot of unethical things that promoters do. I wouldn't say this is unethical. It might be annoying and weird and, frustrating, but I don't think anyone's going to say it's unethical. And I'm not surprised. And to be honest, maybe Eddie Hearn didn't initially think he was going to do more of these fights. He probably just thought it was a one-off, and then he saw the money that came in, and you know what? Money's going to change people's minds. And you know what? Let's face it. He serves, he's not his own boss, right? He serves DAZN. If DAZN said, wait, so you want to put on Billy Joe Saunders and Canelo when no one watched Billy Joe Saunders last fight, but these YouTube stars just bought in $100 million? Like, if I'm Eddie Hearn and if I'm his boss, I'm thinking, all right, well, you do have a kind of a good point. So there's more layers, I think, than it appears. And because of that, we are probably going to see some of these. But you know what? I'm fine with it if we end up getting fights from other guys. Like Billy Joe Saunders fought on that same card. That's fine. If that means you're pairing this with a Canelo fight, then by all means, so be it. And if anything, if boxing has suffered from one thing over the last, 20 or 30 years, boxing hasn't really hit pop culture at all over the last 20, 30 years. In fact, it's really suffered from that, if anything. Boxing has kind of been its own niche in so many different ways, where basketball has touched on so many different things, and politics and social issues and this and that. So basketball is linked strongly with musicians and rappers and this like that. Boxing doesn't really have any of that. So and when that happens, that means there's more money. That means there's more fighters. There's more quality. There's more, there's more everything. So I think from a financial standpoint, what it could do for boxing in general is a good thing. What does that, if that means that real boxers are losing dates and losing spots, then I have an issue with it. But you know what? If everyone else is watching and they're happy with it, as long as it makes more fights happen in general, the fights we want to see, then I'm all for it. If it doesn't, then I have a problem with it.
Okay, last topic for you guys. John, last Thursday, Errol Spence's trainer, Derek James, told Boxing News 24 that Spence is fine, that all the reports that he's much more injured than previously reported are just rumors put out by haters. But then he admitted that he hasn't seen Spence, hasn't even spoken to him since Spence flipped his Ferrari 5 times while he was driving drunk at 100 miles an hour on October 10th. That's 5 weeks ago. Earlier this month, I think you said it was Rich Marotta, a sports pundit from Las Vegas, said that Spence is much worse off than his people are letting on, according to his sources, and actually may never fight again. We haven't seen any follow-up at all on that. But I just think it's kind of strange that we've heard virtually nothing. There's been no updates that I found from Spence or his people since he left the hospital. And I'm not exactly a conspiracy theorist by nature, but why the cone of silence around Errol Spence? If he's doing great, why wouldn't they trot him out in broad daylight and show us?
Yeah, and I think it was Rick Glazer who
That's right.
mentioned.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah,
Rick Glazer, yeah. He's been a boxing guy for years and years, so when he says something, he's right a lot. I mean, he had inside information about pay-per-view numbers of people. The promoters were saying one thing, and when the numbers actually were released, Rick was right. So anything that Rick says, I always sit up and pay close attention to, and he said his sources are telling him that Errol Spence is in pretty bad shape and he might not fight again. Actually, that would make sense because of that horrific accident that we witnessed, because we were all saying what a miracle it was. I think it's very troubling that we haven't seen him. It reminds me, Dennis, of years ago when some other type of celebrity would be ill and there would be no report, and you wouldn't know what was going on, and no one would see the person, and then they remember, and then they die, and you go. It was like I don't know why this popped into my head. It was like Jack Benny, 1974. People didn't know that Jack Benny was so ill, and when he died,
another one.
There you go. We were shocked. And it's because they keep a close lid on things, and that is troubling. I hope we're wrong. I hope we're not being conspiracy crazies here, but it is troubling. I think if it was me and you and Riz, if we were in his corner, we'd want to say, look, let's just stop this right now. All we got to do, is call whatever and say, hey, come over here and do an interview with us so we can shut this down right now. And that would be it. But the fact that they're not doing it is troubling. It might not be as extreme as Rick's reports are saying, that he might not fight again, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's in pretty bad shape, meaning, I don't know, I guess he's home. There have been conflicting stories on that. We know his teeth got knocked out, right? But he might have suffered some head trauma, you would think, getting ejected from his Ferrari. So I hate to say it, but I take everything Rick says very seriously, and he's not a hater. Rick Glazer is not a hater, not a chance. So I guess we just have to wait for the Spence team to show something officially or do something officially. But right now, all this sentiment, oh wow, what a lucky guy, what a miracle. I don't know. I really don't know what to think. I'm concerned. The bottom line is, forget the boxing. I want him to be okay. I want him to have a good life. He's got 2 little daughters, but it's very worrisome that we're just not seeing him. It's like he's dropped off the face of the earth, and that's always a problem with somebody who's having issues. You can't. They got to know that him doing this is making people wonder more. So his PR team or whatever is like, oh gosh. But if they don't want him to come before the camera, there's got to be a reason, right? And it can't be a good one. At least I don't think, or he doesn't want to do it. And one thing about Errol Spence, usually in between fights, he kind of disappears. So maybe he's just being stubborn and doesn't want to do it. But I don't know. I can't help but think that it could be bad, and I don't want it to be, but they're making us think that way by their weird reactions to everything, and we're back to just hoping for the best now.
Any final words, Riz?
I don't know, to be honest. I from a strict PR, to get ahead of the messaging, and I don't think they're doing that right now. And if you don't want journalists to speculate, and you don't want to call people haters, then don't let them. Tell people what's going on. If you say that, he is still healing up and, he's not ready to make a public appearance, fine. Don't say that he's perfectly fine and he escaped without a scratch, and then another story comes out and says that he's unable to walk or whatever the case, right? Something to be noted that he hasn't put up an Instagram post or Twitter, and there hasn't been any photos or anything of him. I don't know if he's maybe just on vacation with his family. I mean, I can see how mentally exhausting this might be, and he just might need some time to mentally and physically rest. That's all fine, right? But if you don't want people to speculate, do not give them a chance to do so. I mean, we see this in every single scandal, from politics to sports. If you don't say anything, people are going to speculate. You might get mad that people speculated, but that's why you don't give them the opportunity to do so. That is PR 101. It's funny how many people think that, like, no, we can't say anything because that means, we're going to be in fault or anything like that. You not saying anything is always going to be worse. And I think that's what we're seeing here, because the initial messaging was he's fine. And if he is fine, we expected to see a picture or something of that. And then obviously if someone says, he's fine and there's no image or there's nothing to back that up, then what's going to happen? People are going to speculate. And now after the speculation, they have a problem with it. And there's been nothing to correct that speculation. So that speculation is going to continue and continue and continue until they correct it. or until there's something other than news that breaks. But until that, his name is going to come up in every story. When we're talking about a Keith Thurman future opponent, when we're talking about a Pacquiao future opponent, when we're talking about Crawford and all these other guys, his name is going to come up and the speculation will continue. So it's up to them to correct that.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff from Rizwaan, Zahid, and John J. Raspanti. They are the official oracles of the Ringside Boxing Show. Awesome job, guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a great week.
Take care, guys.
We will be right back. John will be right back with our historian, Ron Jackson, an author who's going to tell us about a truly amazing boxing story from the year 1889. So, hey, guys, if you got to pee now because we ain't stopping along the way. This is the Ringside Boxing Show. I'm Dennis Taylor, co-author of the Amazon bestseller Intimate Warfare, the true story of the Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward boxing trilogy. Writing this book was a labor of love for John J. Raspanti and myself. We enjoyed every minute of the process and considered it a privilege to tell the tale of one of the most electrifying boxing trilogies in the history of this sport. Intimate Warfare traces the collision course of Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward from their earliest days through their 3 epic fights, as well as the aftermath of this great rivalry, which culminated in one of the greatest friendships in boxing. Intimate Warfare has received a 4.5-star rating from readers and was endorsed by Hall of Famers Harold Letterman and Joe Cortez and 2-time Trainer of the Year Virgil Hunter. Our foreword was written by Ray Boom Boom Mancini, another one of the greatest blood and guts fighters of our time. Get your copy today at Amazon.com.
You're listening to the Ringside Boxing Show, the hottest, sweatiest show on West Coast radio.
Go on, get out of here. Welcome back to the Ringside Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm John J. Raspanti. Today's featured guest has written 7 books, including most recently Joe the Slave Who Became an Alamo Legend, Beavis and the Bear, Coach Bryant, Gene Stallings, and their 1968 Cotton Bowl Showdown, which I remember very well, and one that caught our eye around here, Fight to the Finish, the Barge Battle of 1889, Gentleman Jim Corbett, Joe Chwinski, and the fight that launched boxing's modern era. We're pleased to welcome historian Ron J. Jackson Jr. to the program. Hello, Ron. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, John. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, of course. I love this kind of boxing history. It's fascinating stuff. Let's start from the beginning, Ron. And this part caught my eye when I was reading your book. You state that you researched Fight to the Finish for 4 years, even though writing about the fight and the participants has been on your mind for over 3 decades. Tell us when and how you learned about that epic match. You mentioned it in the book about a friend mentioning it, and then you guys were talking about it. Tell us about how that all went down, about how you learned about Corbett and Joe Chwinski.
Well, I'll give readers the Cliff Notes version. I was a senior in high school at Vacaville High School in Northern California. I played on the baseball team, and we're waiting around practice one day, and just to give listeners a little understanding, I was a bit of a sports nerd back then, with boxing and baseball. Those were my 2 favorite sports, and so I kind of prided myself in knowing a lot about local history and just those 2 sports in general. And one of my teammates had said, you ever heard of Gentleman Jim Corbett? And I kind of smirked. Of course I'd heard of Corbett, the first gloved heavyweight champ. And he says, did you know he fought some dude on a barge in Benicia? And Benicia was about, 25 minutes from where I grew up. It was basically my backyard. And I was kind of stunned because I'd never heard that he had fought in Benicia. And that one seed kind of stayed with me probably for the next year. I started working part-time as a sports writer for the Reporter in Vacaville. And it was around that time that I finally started to look into the fight. I wanted to know if it was just more than an exhibition or what it was. And, of course, back then it's all, pre-internet. So I had to do kind of, on-the-ground work. And I went to the state library, looked up the ring record book, found out sure he'd fought Joe Chwinski, who, of course, is a legendary fighter himself. And I found out that 3 major San Francisco newspapers covered the fight blow by blow like they often did in those days, but that it was an illegal affair. And I just started diving in. I knew right then and there was a book. Of course, I was completely ill-prepared at that time with my craft to be able to write it, but I recognized even then it was a legendary event. And the more I just dug into it, and the more I found out about their rivalry and their careers and just everything leading up to it, I was just so 3 decades that thing was in my brain. Basically, since I was 19 years old, I knew I was going to write this book. So that's kind of how it was born.
Yeah, I'm curious, how difficult was it to research a fight that happened like 130 years ago?
Well, I mean, I guess the average person would probably say very difficult, but this is kind of what I do. I mean, I've written 3 books on the Alamo. So, you're talking about researching people like David Crockett and Jim Bowie, and you're trying to hunt down any primary source that can give you a glimpse into the past. And that's really what I did here. And really, compared to what some of the books I've done in the past on American history, this one was actually, there was an abundance of eyewitness accounts and primary sources to draw from, some oral histories. The Koinski family provided me with letters from the family. So I had a lot of material to draw from. And, of course, when you're doing a nonfiction narrative, you have to do an extensive amount of research to bring everything to life, from not only the participants and the events that took place, but also the places that they went, Benicia and San Francisco in the 1880s and, across the bay in Marin County where really the fight originally started. You have to do an extensive amount of research, and you have to stay within the bounds of the evidence. And that's the trick of it. So in order to bring those things to life, I want the reader to feel like they're there at ringside on this barge watching this fight. And you have to do an extensive amount of research to be able to do that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Tell us more about Corbett, who worked as a bank teller in San Francisco and came from a big family, and Koinski, the son of a literary Jewish immigrant.
Yeah. It's funny. They literally, a lot of times the term blood feud's kind of thrown around loosely. In their case, this was really true. I mean, they had initially met in Corbett's father's livery stable. They had a kind of a brief sparring session with a couple of brothers that were bragging about their younger brother's ring exploits, and that's kind of how it all started. But as much as they became kind of rivals, they were a lot alike. Both of them came from solid middle class upbringings. In Koinski's case, both of his parents were extensively into literature and thinking. I mean, Ian Koinski, his father had a antiquarian bookstore in San Francisco where, people like Mark Twain would hang out, and it was a kind of a think tank, and so he was exposed to a lot of this stuff. And I think later in his life, you can see he loved the piano and antiques and things like that. Corbett came from a very solid middle class background too, and a lot of love, a lot of support in both families. So they were really a lot alike. And beyond that, they were both extremely intelligent, very passionate about learning their craft, and very tough and very determined to make something of themselves. So they had a lot of the same qualities, which I detail in the book, which is kind of interesting given their, their rivalry.
Yes, it was very interesting. Yeah. They lived about a mile away from each other in San Francisco. Is that correct?
Yeah. And they ran in rival gangs. And, of course, back then, I'm not talking about Crips and Bloods, but, just kind of the neighborhood guys that you hung out with. And they were obviously in both groups. They were kind of the lead bull, and so that was kind of interesting too. But yeah, a mile apart from each other, two Hall of Fame boxers. I mean, I think Koinski could have easily been a heavyweight champ as well, you know. So,
yeah,
it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, give us a little more background on how the feud began. Before I read your book, I remember reading something years ago that they, and this could be urban legend or boxing mythology, which happens, but they had first fought when they were little kids, when they were little boys. But I didn't see, and I think you mentioned it, but there's nothing to really prove that. But they were very aware of each other, right? That you mentioned how they came to the Koinskis came to the Corbett barn, and that's where it kind of started. But they were aware of each other before that, right?
Yeah, it was really at the livery stable that day. They were both teenagers, and I don't exactly remember the age. I think they were around 18, 19, 17, somewhere in there. They were teenage kids, and two older brothers worked down at City Hall, and were bragging on the other brother, and they just set up this impromptu kind of sparring session at the livery stable. And that was the first time that they saw each other in that setting. Maybe they had passed each other on the streets and stuff, but I never found any record of that. But the first time in that livery stable was the first time they faced each other, and they knew instantly. I think Koinski's comment after that was, I knew there would be bad blood after this, and that they were destined to fight. So they both knew at that moment that at some point they were going to meet down the road. I don't think they knew how or in what setting, but they knew that was kind of the start of it, and it really festered from there. And after that, they even fought on a hillside in San Francisco, kind of a remote place at the time. They had a little scuffle, street fight there, and it just festered from there. But I think the thing that I detail in the book too that's really interesting, and I think there's other fights that probably this happens a lot, but there were a lot of parties on the outside that had kind of a stake in the fight. Gamblers wanted something good to gamble on. One of the stakeholders was the sports editor of the San Francisco Chronicle. He actually held the money for the fight and helped them hammer out the details. He's selling newspapers. And then there was this, there was the rivalry of the clubs, the Swank Olympic Club that Corbett belonged to, and then the California Athletic Club, which was more blue collar. And you had all these kind of competing factions that wanted to see this fight happen. And of course you had a pretty strong undercurrent of ethnic pride, the Irishman versus the Jew. But as I say in the book, I mean, by all accounts, by the evidence, I think these two fighters just wanted to fight to see who was the best fighter. I think all that other stuff was swirling around these guys. And you got to remember, when they stepped foot on that barge, Koinski's 20 and Corbett's 22. They're just kids. And so you can imagine an entire city like San Francisco, which was a boxing mecca back then, the pressures and it was a super fight in its day,
Sure. Yeah, definitely. This is the Ringside Boxing Show. I'm John J. Raspanti. Today we're speaking with author Ron J. Jackson Jr., who's written an outstanding book on the legendary fight between gentleman James J. Corbett and Joe Koinski that went down on a barge. That's right, on a barge in 1889. Ron, you write that Corbett's father, I found this really interesting, didn't want him to be a boxer. Why was that?
Yeah, back then there was, and I found the same thing in the Koinski family. There was a bit of a kind of a stigma to prize fighting. It wasn't seen as something honorable, and yet it's kind of funny because with Corbett's father and with Ian Koinski, Joe's father, there was an immense amount of pride. In fact, Ian Koinski, he wrote for a Jewish newspaper, and you can see examples of his writings where he's bragging profusely on his brother and his son and his ring exploits. But there was this kind of conflicting thing. But yeah, it was in a lot of circles. It was seen as. In fact, they thought Corbett was going to lose his job at the bank because he fought he fought a lot of fights in the Barbary Coast and down at the I mean there were kind of underground fights that a lot of these guys took part in, and it was just seen as seemly back then.
Yeah, and you also mentioned, which I found fascinating, that Kowinski's father was pretty much okay, as you said, bragged about his son's boxing exploits, but his mom really had an issue with that. And I was reading that. How did he manage to convince her that it was okay, that he was a boxer?
Yeah, she was very. She came from a very kind of prim and proper upbringing, and I think there was a ton of love in both families, but she was very against prize fighting, and I found interviews with some of the grandchildren and stuff that knew, Uncle Joe, and talked about that, where she was really kind of hesitant about that kind of lifestyle for him. But to their credit, I mean, both of those guys, even though they received some resistance, and they plowed ahead with their own dreams. And, in the end, their families were very proud of them. But they were seeking their own version of their American dream. And that was through prize fighting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you mentioned Corbett worked as a boxing instructor at the Olympic Club in San Francisco, which basically was pretty elite. And Kowinski, as I remember, toiled away during some hard labor. You mentioned the men. You mentioned how intelligent they were. Tell us a little more. I mean, what really came through in your book that I really liked? And I've read a lot about Corbett and Kowinski, but the depth of the two men, they really did. They weren't a couple of mugs, were they? I mean, we're talking about a couple of pretty deep guys.
No, and I'm sure you know people yourself, John, like this, and I'm kind of one of those people. I kind of breezed through high school. I was almost kind of bored with high school, and then I found my passion through sports and boxing and baseball and writing, and it just I flourished. These guys, it was the same with them. I mean, I think they found Corbett. Now Corbett had this God-given natural ability. He was probably the fastest thing the heavyweight division had ever seen. I think a lot of things came naturally to him, but what made him a sort of kind of Michael Jordan in his field was he coupled that with his dedication and determination. He studied. As simple as when he was at the bank, he would start using his left hand to do common things, because he was thinking how I need to be strong in both hands. Kowinski would study the body. He would study where people were vulnerable, and they were always looking for an edge and always looking to advance themselves. So they had the work ethic, the passion, and they just combined it with their thinking. And like you said, they were far from a couple of mugs. I mean, they were thinkers. And they were tough.
Yeah.
They grew up. They had to be tough.
Yeah, that definitely comes across. And Corbett was more of a boxer, which was pretty unique back in those days, right? Kowinski was very aggressive, but Corbett used a little footwork, did some things that really weren't seen very much in those days, right?
Right. Yeah. It was. He was at the cutting edge, and I think that's why he sliced up Sullivan so bad. Was that Sullivan came from more of that brawling. Aside from probably being, past his prime, he came from that more man-on-man, I'm going to stand and brawl with you. Corbett was really into feigning and hit, the science of boxing. I think that really came across. One thing Corbett said that really stuck with me, and I really believe was true. He said on the barge fight, which went 27 rounds, he said, I received more punishment in that one fight than all my other fights combined. Now, that might sound like hyperbole, but when you really study his career and you study that fight, I think he was being dead serious. He received more punishment in that one fight than this whole, because he made a living out of not being hit. And I just always found that fascinating.
Yeah, Corbett and Kowinski met a few times, as we talked about before the barge battle. The build-up you do in the book is great, Ron, because, I mean, I obviously know, and most people that would read this book would know that eventually they're going to fight on a barge. It says it on the front, but you make it very interesting, especially since the day that it was. I mean, boxing was basically illegal in those days, as we've talked about.
Right.
But what was going on behind the scenes was great. I want to ask you about what happened when they fought in Fairfax. That was at a barn, right? Fairfax. Tell me about that.
That's a great story. Yeah, it's a great story. And, I went to all these places. I walked in the footsteps of these guys. And so naturally I hunted down the spot for the fight. Since it was a clandestine affair, the organizers were looking for a place that was pretty remote. And somebody had a friend who had an old, farm out in this box canyon in Marin County, which is just north of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Out in the country back then, there's a 2-story barn. That's where they decided to have the fight on May 3rd, May 30th. That was the day they were supposed to do this finish fight. And they get to the barn, and they, the organizers literally like swept away the buggy tracks leading up to the barn, and all the participants are leaving their firearms at the door, and trying to be as orderly as possible. But what was funny about it is, as you can imagine, more people got the tip than not. And so you had literally tugboats full of people coming to Marin County and trekking across the county to go to this barn. And so they get started, and the sheriff there, a man named Sheriff Healy, he catches wind that all these people are, flocking to his county. Of course, he's already on the alert because the newspapers are, as secret as this is, the newspapers are reporting daily, Corbett and Kowinski seen in private, blah, blah, blah. And so he knows they're training in their county and that the fight is likely to take place in their county. And there's a whole chapter, which is a colorful event, on how he tracks down where the fight's at. And I've been there, and it's a remote place today. It's in this box canyon, and I tip my hat to that guy for finding it. And he climbs the stairs, and everybody goes silent, and and literally tells the guys, "Hey, I can't have you fight here, but you go fight in the next county. I'll sit in with you." And he was true to his word. He was true to his word. Sure enough, when they resumed 6 days later in a place called Southampton Bay, outside Benicia, a little town of about 3,000 people back then, and he's among the bystanders watching. So it was a colorful event.
Yeah, his story was great. I was grinning when I was reading it. I thought, man, you're like a Sheriff Sherlock Holmes here, the way you were able to track where this was going on, in 1889.
Yeah.
So tell me, Ron, whose idea was it to fight on a barge in Benicia?
Well, I think, it was never really clear who came up with the idea, but one of Corbett had a couple different supporters. One was a guy named Lawler, who owned the barge, and it was called the Excel. It was a grain barge who'd probably plied up and down the Carquinez Straits, which is, the bay that they fought in was right off the Carquinez Straits, which is kind of like a super highway for goods to come through to the Bay Area and on into the Pacific. And I think he came up with, I imagine he probably offered up the barge, but I think what had happened was when the sheriff broke up the fight in Fairfax, I think they wanted to resume the fight that day, but they were unable to. So 6 days later, they come up with a plan to do it on a barge. And I think what was going to happen was if law enforcement had got there and tried to stop it, and they'd have to, of course, get on a little skiff and go out to the barge and stop it, I think they'd have just pulled up anchor and went somewhere else. And I think that was the whole idea with the barge, that they could just move it to another locale and finish their scrap. So they were determined that one of them said they were determined not to have the fun spoiled, So that's kind of how that happened. Yeah, which makes for just an amazingly colorful event.
Oh my gosh, is it ever? So, from what I've known, read, and everything, and Corbett being legendary, and so was Kowinski in a way. I think I remember that Corbett was considered the favorite, but going into the fight, but not by much, right? I mean, it was pretty much a 50-50 fight in a lot of ways, even though I thought Corbett was slightly favored.
Yeah, I think I think back then it was kind of like you had two different factions, so the city's kind of split down the middle on who they're rooting for, and I think the rooting had more to do with the logic behind it. If you really look at Kowinski was a lot rawer than Corbett was at that point. Corbett was a lot more polished at that point, and so he clearly should have been the favorite in that fight going in. What's interesting is that he broke some knuckles on one of his hands during the Fairfax scrap, and so he's going into this fight with kind of one hand. And I don't want to give away too much, but the bars fight gets really brutal. And in fact, I just think that the determination, the stamina, the courage, I think one would be really hard pressed to find a fight that surpassed this in those areas in the annals of boxing history. I mean, it was just an epic bloodbath and an epic fight in that regard. Probably prettier affairs, but nothing more brutal. And these guys.
We'll talk about that in a second. I found this really fascinating too, and this is just because of the modern boxing where the fights all happen at night. But it's true, the bouts started at around 8 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, it went for about an hour and 45 minutes, and it was so. They had put they had constructed a makeshift ring the night before. In fact, from Benicia, you could hear the hammering and everything. They had strewn the floor with some rosin to help with footing, and about halfway through that fight, that rosin was sopped up by the blood of both fighters, and the sun just beat unmercifully down on these guys. And in fact, there was a wheelhouse that kind of overlooked the ring, and the way the sun was angled, there was like a patch of shade that they talk about, and they literally spent round after round fighting for that little patch of shade. That's how desperate they were for energy, and it was a brutal affair in that terms with the sun beating down on them, and then the punishment that they received. I mean, they get to the ring ready to start the fight. There's of course they had paper thin gloves back then, and Kowinski's camp said they forgot the gloves, so there was a whole controversy over. And I think what was going on there, I think it's pretty obvious, is that the Kowinski camp wanted a bare knuckle fight, and Corbett wanted nothing to do with a bare knuckle fight, especially with the damaged hand. He wanted some sort of protection. And somebody in the audience offered up literally some driving gloves. And, we've all seen them with the 3 seams on the back of the hand, like a garden glove. And they cut off the tips of those gloves. Corbett said, heck with it, use it. I don't care. We're fighting. And so every time that Kowinski, hit Corbett, I mean, they're getting the seams of these gloves. They're just shredding each other. And then they're dousing them with water, and you can only imagine what that did to the wounds. It just, I mean, in 27 rounds of that, So
but like you said, I don't want to give away too much because it was just such an incredible fight. But the brutality is, I was reading it, and I've obviously, like I said, read about it, but I had never read about the fight in this kind of detail. And you do an extraordinary job with that. You do make people feel like you're right there at ringside, which is pretty cool, considering you can imagine the water and the sun and trying to find a shaded area to fight. I mean, it's mind-boggling in this day and age to consider that. But then I'm not going to go into much of it. Like I said, I want people to read it because the injury sustained during those 27 rounds, the determination where one guy is just about done and then he comes back and there's blood. I mean, there's everything going on. I mean, you think that the reason that their fight was such a great one, obviously, was it a combination of their styles and their determination? Is that how you read into that?
Yeah, the styles and the determination, and the rivalry had festered to such a point, and I think it had been prodded along as well, by all these outside forces, that I think they were just hell bent on not losing it. I literally think they would have rather have died than have lost that fight. I mean, and of course, I always try to put things into context of the time period. People were raised tough back then. I mean, street fights were the way you handled a lot of things, and so they had that pride. I think pride is what drove this fight. Was the pride, and neither one. There was no quit in either one of them. And if you walked away from this fight, if for nothing else, you knew that these guys were determined young men. It's impressive beyond belief. One of the things that really inspired me to write this too is, it was such a legendary fight, and for its time period, it was a legend. And I've noticed this with other historical events that, as the participants die and as the historians and the storytellers die, it became told with less frequency and certainly less facts, till it almost becomes mythological. And I think we saw this a few years back with Seabiscuit and the Cinderella Man, James J. Braddock. Those were events that everybody knew in the country about those events, but a whole new generation, it had really been lost to time. And so one of my goals was to salvage this legendary fight for a new generation of people to enjoy. And so that was a big motivation in bringing this thing to life the way I did. And that's the way I write. I write nonfiction historical narratives where, people can take that journey through the historical evidence and record. And, so I try to get as close to the truth as I can. Any historian can only hope to get close to it. You're never going to get exactly, but I'm extremely pleased with the way this came out, and I hope a whole new generation of fight fans can enjoy this legendary battle. So.
Oh, absolutely, and it is worth anybody's time to read, and I'm really glad that you wrote it because, as you said, it was really important these things shouldn't be forgotten in the annals of boxing. So, Ron, are you working on anything new right now?
Yeah, I'm actually I'm doing a book on a bull rider named Freckles Brown, and in the 67 National Rodeo Finals, he drew a bull named Tornado. Tornado had never been ridden, had bucked every cowboy had ever been on there, and Freckles was kind of an over-the-hill, broken down cowboy. And anyway, it's kind of the story of this iconic moment in time. It's a lot like Fight to the Finish in that respect. It's an iconic moment. But one of the books that I'm kind of toying with is doing the Jack Johnson Jeffries fight. But I want to do it. I'm thinking about doing it more from the perspective of the cultural impact that it had in its day, and the aftermath, which was pretty brutal in itself. So I've got some different projects I'm working on, but yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Fight to the Finish, The Barge Battle of 1889 is available online at Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Amazon.com, where it's received a 5-star rating, and I agree. I can vouch for that. I loved writing my review for Max Boxing. People out there listening,
thanks.
It's a great read. Great read, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it greatly.
Yeah, I want to thank you for appearing on the Ringside Boxing Show, and best of luck with your new book and your new programs. And hey, when you get the Jeffries Johnson book out there, we'll have you on again.
Yeah, sounds good. Appreciate it, John.
Okay, you bet. Take care, Ron. Thank you.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, do you like
Bye.
this show? Yeah. You like this show? Do us a solid and tell the boxing fans about our podcast. Post the Ringside Boxing Show on your social media sites and help us grow. I also want to remind you that Dennis and myself wrote an Amazon bestseller called Intimate Warfare, the true story of the Arturo Gatti and Mickey Ward boxing trilogy. It's received a rating of almost 5 stars in reader reviews, and we're pretty proud of that. And I've got a new one online called Blood on My Notebook, Dispatches from the World of Professional Boxing. It's more of a personal account of 10 years of my journey in the boxing world. It's got features and ringside reports and a number of things in the crazy world of professional boxing, plus a fictional story that I wrote. So it's fun. It's a hodgepodge of things. So I want to thank our expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwaan, Zahid, and, of course, Dennis, who's producing today, who always does a fantastic job. Our British correspondent, Paul McLaughlin, who's great. I love his reports. And another huge thanks to today's featured guest, Ron Jackson, author of Fight to the Finish, The Barge Battle of 1889, Gentleman Jim Corbett, Joe Kowinski, and the fight that launched boxing's modern era. Don't miss this one. And, of course, we appreciate you, Ringside Nation, for being a part of our worldwide audience again today. Keep your chin tucked, and we'll talk to you again next week on the Ringside Boxing Show.
Well, it's a great day for me to whoop somebody's ass. It's a bad day, so you better get off of my back, 'cause you might get cold cocked if you cross my path.